guys, it's your girl Greta. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Here is, as promised, the reading wrap-up video for 2022. I ended up reading 91 books. To be perfectly honest though, I did read a lot of books of the Bible and I counted each individual book of the Bible as a book, and I did read some multiple times. I just thought I would do a little reading wrap-up, tell you what books you should definitely read, what books you should definitely skip out on. So let's get started. Okay, these are the books that I'm not going to be ranking. The books of the Bible: Job, Ecclesiastes, Obadiah, Jonah, Habakkuk, Malachi, Mark, John, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus, Philemon, James, 2 Peter, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and Jude. Moving on to the books that I think you should absolutely not be reading. These are the books that I absolutely hated this year. Some of them are ones I actually didn't finish, but I read such a significant portion of them that I counted them. Starting with the first book that I read this year in this section, An Abundance of Catherines by John Green. This book is so terrible. Please do not read it. Please do not subject yourself to it. I know everyone's like, oh my gosh, John Green, he's like such a fantastic author. No, he's not. If this is an indication of how good of an author he is, he's not a good author. The next book is The Scorch Trials by James Dashner, the second book in the Maze Runner series. Don't read it. It's so boring. I hated it. Next is The Wife of Bath and The Pardoner's Tale by Chaucer. They're part of Canterbury Tales. They're mid. Don't read them. Next is The Rosie Project by Graham Simpson. Don't read it. It's so bad. Next is Normal People by Sally Rooney. I know this is a really unpopular opinion, but it's like literally just people like going to each other's houses. The love interest, they're not even interesting. If you're gonna be a love interest, you have to be interesting. I'm sorry. Next is Ace, which I read on Wattpad. This is my first Wattpad book and last Wattpad book. It was so bad. Next is Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. I read like a significant portion of this and I was like, absolutely not, it's terrible, so I stopped reading it. And then the last book that you should not read is Don Quixote by Cervantes. It's the same story over and over again in every single chapter, so please do not subject yourself to it. The next stack of books is books that like, I'm not discouraging you from reading, but like I personally didn't like them that much. Starting with the first one, we have Dear Edward by Anne Napolitano. I think I gave this 4 stars when I first read it, but looking back I gave it like 2. It was really mid and not interesting. Next is The Divine Comedy by Dante. It's mid. Next we have If I Stay by Gail Forman. It's mid. Next is An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge by Ambrose Bierso. It's about this guy, he's like a soldier. It's like a short story. Next is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. It's not that good. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's so good. It's like Romeo and Juliet. No, it's not. Next is All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. I just think that this book was just too sad to recommend to anyone. It's a lot. Next is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This is also a pretty good book. I do like it. It's okay. I understand why it won the awards it won. Next is Not Here to Be Liked by Michelle Quach. If you're trying to write an unlikable, likable main character, you failed. She is so terrible. I actually liked the love interest. He could do so much better than her. Next was Utopia by Thomas More. I read this for school. I actually did kind of like it, but it's not one that I'm like, oh my goodness, Utopia, it's so good. Next is The Prince by Machiavelli. I also read this one for school. It's okay. Next is The Magnolia Story by Chip and Joanna Gaines. They obviously were just trying to make more money. I support them in that, but like, don't read it. This is Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. I actually missed most of this book because we were reading it during class and I was crying in the bathroom. That's why I don't really have much of an opinion on this one. Next up is Othello and A Midsummer's Night's Dream by Shakespeare. They're both good. I just personally wouldn't recommend them to anyone. They're not my favorite Shakespeare. Next is Four Dead Queens by Astrid Schultz. All I remember is soaking my toe in laundry detergent while reading this. Next we have Smile by Raina Telgemeier. I just read this in one afternoon because I wanted to get my book count up. It's okay. Next we have Lies Young Women Believe and the Truth That Sets Them Free. There are just personally some things that I don't believe are theologically based, but overall, like, I think it's okay. But if you're looking for other good Christian, I won't want to say self-help, there are definitely better ones out there than this one. Speaking of which, we have Questions Christians Hope No One Will Ask. I definitely do like this book. I have other apologetics books coming up that were definitely better than this one. So we have Montaigne's Essays by Montaigne. There were definitely some good ones in here, just wasn't personally my favorite. Next we have Crazy Rich Asians. Pretty good. It got a little boring towards the end and I liked the movie better. Next we have China Rich Girlfriend, the second one in the series. Also, it was okay. Next we have The Song of Achilles. I like understand why people like it, but like personally I'm not one who's like raving for it and recommending it to people. Next we have Sideways Stories from Wayside School. This was like my favorite book in 3rd grade. I understand why I liked it in 3rd grade. It's kind of cute. Next we have 2 Babysitters Club books. As I said in one of my other videos, I am indeed a Babysitters Club fiend. These are pretty good ones. There are definitely better ones out there. And lastly, we have November 9th by Colleen Hoover. It was mid. Now these books I'm going to be going into a little bit more detail on because these are the books that I actually really enjoyed this year and would recommend to people. First off, we have The Penderwicks. It's sort of like a modern retelling of Little Women. I read this when I was younger, and Jeffrey Tifton was my first book character crush. That still holds up today. He's literally one of my favorite people. Next we have Christie's Big Day, my favorite Babysitters Club books. I was feeling nostalgic one day, so I just sat down and whipped through this. Next we have The Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walther. This is a very good book. I love the Taylor Swift references in it. I don't think the love interest or the main character are bad at all. I think they're both decent people. I didn't hate them. The bar is low, but that is the bar. Next we have You Have a Match by Emma Lord. I love camp books. I love summer getaway book. I just think they're so fun. Next we have The Final Gambit, the final book in the Inheritance Game series. I do highly recommend the first two, and I do think that you should finish the series. I just didn't like the third one as much as the first two. Next we have Murder on the Orient Express, an Agatha Christie book. This is probably my favorite Agatha Christie book I've read. It's also one of the two that I've read. Next is We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I know there's two different sides to this book where it's oh my gosh, I love it so much, I hate it so much. I'm definitely in the middle. I understand why people hate it. Also think it's really cute. Cute is not the word to describe this book. I have no clue why I just said that. I think it definitely has good parts to it, and like I said in a previous video, this was the first book that I actually sat in dead silence after finishing. Next we have The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. I actually tabbed this book. It provides an interesting perspective on the gospel. One of those apologetics books I was talking about, Amazing Truths, How Science and the Bible Agree by Michael Guillen. This wasn't exactly what I was expecting. I was thinking it was biblical scientific proofs. It's more how science and the Bible have connections. It was good, it just wasn't what I was expecting. So when I first read it, I rated it 3 stars, but now looking back, I would give it 4 stars. Next is The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. I think this is a super great apologetics book, super interesting story. Next is the Shatter Me series by Tahira Mafi. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering that name. Next is Macbeth by Shakespeare. This is absolutely my favorite Shakespeare play that we've ever read. Absolutely loved it. It was super interesting. Next we have Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. I read this while I was working one night. I had a cold. I filmed a video of me reading it, and all you can hear is me sniffing. And then there's one part where you can just see me start smiling, and then I hit the wall because I was so angry at what was happening in it. I'll insert the clip right here. Next we have The Running Dream by Wendelin Van Dranen. As you know, I have a lot of copies of this, and I actually tabbed it for the first time. Next we have Very Sincerely Yours by Carrie Winfrey. I was really worried that I was going to hate this, but I actually was full-on in love with the love interest, Everett St. James, when I was reading this. Was almost crying because he wasn't real. Next we have One More Thing by BJ Novak. It's okay. It's not great. I don't not recommend it. It has some definitely interesting short stories in it that I do recommend reading, but there are some that you can totally skip over. And the last book in this section is Tuesdays with Morrie, which I actually listened to on audiobook. I think it was super interesting, a super great story. I don't theologically agree with a lot of points on it. I definitely understand where it's coming from, and I think it's super interesting and a fresh perspective for anyone, no matter what you believe in. The next section is my top books of the year that I will recommend to anyone, anytime, everywhere. So the first book is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love the Taylor Jenkins Reid universe. I think it's so interesting how all the stories connect, but they're all still individual stories that take place in different time periods. You can read them as standalone, or you can exist in the universe with it. Get every single book, see the connections between all of them. The next one I read was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Full on sobbing reading this book. I totally understand why everyone loves this. It's so good. Sitting on my couch crying. The next book is Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson, a continuation of the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I love these modern whodunits. Next is The Inheritance Game. As you all know, I am full on in love with Grayson Hawthorne. He is practically my husband at this point with how much I talk about him. Next is The Hawthorne Legacy, the second book in the Inheritance Game series. Literally love this series with my whole life. The next book is The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis. I actually read this book in one day and then went and saw the play. Super duper interesting. Absolutely love this story. Fresh perspective on the idea of heaven and hell. Next is The Cheat Sheet, which I actually read twice this year. Love both the main characters. I don't think either of them are annoying. I think both of them were actually interesting and fun to follow. Next we have the Selection series. I know I said Grayson Hawthorne is my husband. Let me be perfectly clear here. Baxton Shreve is my husband. He is. There's no debate about it. Next up is Carrie Soto is Back, also by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I didn't like it as much as the first two, but it still made it on my best books of the year. She just does that to me. Every single book is going to be a banger. That's just the fact of the matter. The Summer I Turned Pretty. I know I said earlier I cried about Everett St. James not being real. I full on sobbed when Jeremiah Fisher wasn't real. That show is my comfort show, and I cry every time I watch it because Jeremiah Fisher is not real. I don't want to be this person, but I am. And it is so embarrassing. And now for my final book, my book of the year, Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Absolutely my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book ever. It's written all in dialogue, so it's really easy to read. I highly recommend listening to the audiobook with it. They get different actors for every single character, so it's like you're listening to a movie, like a documentary. It is so good. I listened to it at school when we had a work day, and I was just sitting there like staring into space, and my teacher was like, "Greta, are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I'm listening to Daisy Jones and the Six." Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what books you enjoyed this year, and I will maybe add them to my TBR for 2023. Hope you enjoyed.